The Korean War, a Cold War conflict. The Korean War, which lasted from June 25, 1950 to July 27, 1953, was a pivotal conflict in the early Cold War period. It was a war between North Korea, supported by China and the Soviet Union, and South Korea, backed by the United Nations, principally the United States. This war was significant not only for its immediate impact on the Korean Peninsula, but also for its broader implications for the global Cold War dynamics. The roots of the Korean War can be traced back to the end of World War II, when Korea, previously under Japanese occupation, was liberated. The Korean Peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel into two occupation zones, with the Soviet Union administering the north and the United States administering the south. This division was intended to be temporary, but the onset of the Cold War resulted in the establishment of two separate governments, a communist government in the north under Kim Il-sung and a capitalist government in the south under Syngman Rhee. Both leaders aspired to reunify Korea under their respective regimes, setting the stage for conflict. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel, invading South Korea. This surprise attack caught the South Korean and American forces off guard, and the North Korean army made significant initial gains, capturing the South Korean capital, Seoul. The United Nations Security Council, in the absence of the Soviet Union, passed a resolution condemning the invasion and called for member states to assist South Korea. President Harry S. Truman quickly committed American forces to the conflict under the UN banner, marking the beginning of a large-scale international military intervention. The early phase of the war saw North Korean forces pushing deep into South Korea, confining South Korean and UN troops to the Pusan perimeter. However, a daring amphibious assault at Incheon, orchestrated by General Douglas MacArthur in September 1950, turned the tide of the war. This successful operation allowed UN forces to recapture Seoul and push North Korean troops back across the 38th parallel. As UN forces advanced into North Korea and approached the Yalu River, China, fearing a threat to its border security, intervened in the war. In October 1950, Chinese forces crossed into North Korea, launching a massive counteroffensive that pushed UN troops back into South Korea and recaptured Seoul in January 1951. The war then settled into a bloody stalemate, with both sides engaging in fierce battles along the 38th parallel. Notable battles during this period include the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge and the Battle of Pork Chop Hill. Despite numerous offensives and counteroffensives, neither side could achieve a decisive victory. By 1951, both sides recognized the futility of continuing the conflict without a clear path to victory, and peace talks began. These negotiations were protracted, lasting over 2 years due to disagreements over prisoner exchange and the demarcation line. Finally, on July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed, establishing the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, around the 38th parallel and effectively ending the hostilities. The Korean War had profound and lasting consequences. The war devastated the Korean Peninsula, resulting in significant loss of life and destruction. Approximately 5 million soldiers and civilians died, and millions more were wounded or displaced. The armistice left Korea divided along the 38th parallel, a division that remains to this day, with North Korea and South Korea still technically at war since no peace treaty was ever signed. For the United States and its allies, the Korean War marked a significant escalation in the Cold War, demonstrating the willingness of the United States to use military force to contain communism. It also led to an increased American military presence in Asia and the formation of military alliances such as SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. For China, the war solidified its status as a major military power and demonstrated its capacity to influence regional conflicts. The Korean War also had significant implications for the development of the Cold War. It was one of the first major conflicts in which the United Nations played a central role, setting a precedent for future international military interventions. The war also influenced American military and foreign policy, leading to an increased emphasis on military preparedness and alliances to counter the perceived threat of communism.